All right there. If you want to get started, we got people pouring in, but I at least have it recording. And then I will monitor the chat for you.
Hold on, I gotta adjust the sound in my speakers here. Just help me out. Who all do we got in the room over there?
Oh boy, you got a rowdy bunch in here today.
I thought you drove me live, Matt, so I drove the NOLA.
Yeah, so Bill Hench is here. We got Tracy, Dave Hook, Scott, we got Taylor, and Dan. I apologize, Dan. Nice to meet you, Dan.
No, that's helpful. Sorry, Henchy. I am not feeling so hot today, so I am keeping my distance from everybody.
I'll let you off, buddy.
You get to be with us, though.
Appreciate that. Well, yeah, appreciate everybody taking the time. And I just judging from the number of phone calls and, like I said, got a minute that I've had in the last couple of days, and the amount of noise that I see online, it feels like we should have just an ongoing conversation. So for today, I don't want to tell you that anything new has come out since the weekend, because really it hasn't. Right, the court hasn't done anything, the MLS hasn't publicly done anything, most of our vendors haven't publicly done anything yet. There is
hey Matt, your audio is a little rough.
All right,
it's in and out.
Hold on. Head nod, thumbs up. All right. I can't. Can somebody talk to make sure that I can hear you?
Here, try that again, Bill. I had us on mute.
We can hear you, Matt.
Thank you.
I'll leave the mute.
It is
open.
deathly quiet over here. All right. So what I think we need to talk about today is not necessarily what the world is going to look like 3 or 6 or 12 months from now. I think we need to talk about today is some best practices for our current clients, having conversations. What do those look like when people call in? I've heard a number of different variations of current sellers who are under contract asking, what does this mean for them? You know, should they be delaying listings, things of that nature. So this really is meant to be a two-way conversation, because I don't have residential sellers as my clients. So hearing what you're hearing is really, really helpful. And the group hearing what you're hearing is really, really helpful. I've got some I've got some notes here that we can start from, if that's all right. And then this is meant to be a group conversation. Everybody all right with that?
Yep.
Somebody, anybody? Okay. All right. So, you know, the phone calls from current customers, I think is pretty straightforward, right? We're looking to acknowledge the fact that we know that there's a lot going on, that the media is going kind of crazy about this, and acknowledge what we do and don't know, right? So I think that's been pretty well outlined in previous communications. If anybody has any questions on that, we can certainly talk through it. And then the next piece is just to confirm that until the court rules on this, all of our current rules, processes, and contracts are still applicable, right? This doesn't change the nature of any current listing contracts. It doesn't change the nature of any current buyer agreements. It doesn't change any agreements of sale that might be in place, right? So again, this is more about just helping set the record straight, because there is so much noise. Then the next piece of it is also acknowledging the fact that depending on where they are in this process, you know, a lot of us have written roadmaps that we give people, and we say, here's what the process is going to look like, and here are the forms that are going to apply, and here's what cooperation looks like. And depending on where people are in the process, that might have to be a little malleable, right? If they list their property in June and then new rules come out in July, we might have to redo paperwork. And so just setting the stage that while we know what the current rules are, we don't know what changes might come, and just letting them know not to be surprised. So everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Has anybody had this conversation so far? I have one head nod that I can see.
Everybody good?
Well, I mean,
Yes.
I just listed 2 homes and it didn't come up. And yet I've had the conversation outside of a client, and you know me, I worked on my scripts already, so.
Bill?
Yes. Yes, I had a listing appointment 2 days ago and had the conversation with the people and just explained that, the best I could, what it was about. And that really the changes are very minimal of what we're going to be doing from what I see.
Did they ask you first?
They asked me, yes. One person knew out of 6, the other people didn't know.
And I had the only conversation, I don't have residential sellers either. The only conversation, like I've had a couple texts and calls, not from active people, just friends and family members, just curious more than anything. The only person I had an actual conversation with that was in the buying and selling process was Jenny's dad. My father-in-law called me on Saturday and is sort of looking around at buying and selling in the next year. And he asked some more specific questions because he read a number of articles in both the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, and he was obviously confused. And so I just sort of walked him through hopefully a more accurate understanding of it than those 2 media, gave him.
Yeah, so then the question has come up a number of times, and this is where I'm very open to discussion, and the answer might be it depends. But the question has come to me, should I proactively call my active buyers and sellers and talk to them about this, or should I proactively email or host a session like this, or what should I do, or should I just wait? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's a good question, Matt. We debated that as a team as well on Tuesday, because we've had some of the same conversations that these guys have had. And one of our agents showed up for their showing on Saturday, like very upset and wanted to learn. And then others, haven't heard anything at all. And so it's, do you bring it up or not?
Yeah, and I think it's probably multifaceted. Right? If you're on the buyer side and you haven't done a buyer consultation, you should probably take a step backwards and do a buyer consultation. Particularly on the buyer side, because that is where the most change is going to occur in the future. And if you're not under contract with them by the time those changes take place, you're setting yourself up for some really awkward conversations. On the list side, I'm again more curious at the moment than I am as far as directive. I've heard every different opinion on whether we should be very proactive or a little bit more reactive on that.
So Matt.
Can you hear Julie okay?
I can.
All right.
So there were a couple things that I thought, because I've been following for a while. I think the first thing is, I know you guys don't think this is stupid, but breathe. Just breathe. And let's remember, it hasn't been approved yet. And I think, as Dave would say, and I'm real passionate about, is making sure that we come from curiosity. And I was on a call this morning, which I haven't been on for a couple of weeks, but I just listened because we didn't have any electricity. I was just listening, and I found it like this is not a time to be defensive. this is a time to remember we're educators. And I think if we stay calm, like my son texted me over the weekend, he went, ouch, this isn't good. And I thought, oh, cool, I'm gonna call you and you're gonna be my first person I get to script with. And if we just stay real calm and just, I said to him, well, what does ouch mean? I'm curious of what you heard. It's sort of like what we're trained to do anyway. I mean, if you've been in business long enough, you certainly have a seller at some point say, I'm not paying, the fee for the buyer's broker, or the buyer's broker. And well, let me ask you. And then you got your script. So in that aspect, and the other thing I think is real curious, and this is what I've said to a few people, has there ever been a time where you listen to the media only to find out a portion of it may not be correct? And is there a possibility that there might be a portion of this from the media that's taking it into a different direction? So I think if we stay out of curiosity, we stay in curiosity and just lead by question and help them to self-realize, I think then we have a better chance of a win-win.
Yeah. I do think I tend to agree that we don't know which media they may have heard, if any. And there are a lot of different versions of what this settlement agreement means. So if we don't ask questions first, it might not be the most helpful thing.
And
For me,
I was gonna say, I have been bringing it up and asking people, have you heard about this? What have you heard? Because I would rather have them hear it from me than have them reach out to me later saying, why didn't you tell me about this?
Yeah. So, and you're doing that voice to voice?
Yes.
Got
Yes. In person at appointments.
How about for active clients? Are you going back and calling active clients?
I haven't yet, but that is actually, I think that's a good idea to do that.
Hey, Matt, it's Scott. I think we should be discussing it to some extent, but like at a very top line, not very superficial, just because basically people are just asking what it's about. Because we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know if it's going to be approved. We suspect that it is, but we don't know what it's going to look like. So until that comes out, we can at least inform them what the whole thing's about and how it, may or may not impact sellers and buyers in the future, but not to get into the nitty gritty and how it's going to potentially affect buyers overall. And, we don't have to give them the history of how it may impact them until we know exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
I'll add to that, Matt, and take this with a grain of salt, because as all of you know, I haven't met with a client in years, so maybe you shouldn't be taking my advice on this. But if I were to meet with a client, I think I would, just knowing what my approach has always been, and this is just a comfort level for me. When I meet with a client, say a seller, for the first time, I want to understand where their head's at and what their biggest fears and concerns are before I advise. And so I always spend more time asking questions and doing a needs analysis on where they think what they think the property is worth and why, what they understand about the listing process, have they ever been through it before, what their biggest fears and concerns about the listing process is. And I'm taking notes so that when I do my listing presentation and explain my value, I can properly unpack the areas of concern for them and properly set their expectations, which helps to just make a smooth transition for them. And this is an area where I would have a hard time just going through a CAN listing presentation and having no idea where their mindset was around this particular topic, and then just explaining the fee like I always have with no explanation, and they could be on one end of the spectrum on this or never have heard of it at all. So I think for me in meeting with a client, like Scott said, I don't need to jump into it and have a separate document where I'm getting prescriptive on this particular topic in the outset. I do think what I'm going to be doing is saying, as part of the process and questioning, embedded in the other questions. So, why are you selling your home? What brought you to this decision? And going through, have you listed your property before with an agent? What was your experience there? By the way, have you heard about the recent changes in our industry? And I'm going to be listening. If they say, yeah, I'm going to say, okay, what did you hear? What questions or concerns do you have? And I'm going to be taking some notes so that I can properly address that. If they have an inaccuracy embedded in their mind that's a fear or concern, I'm going to be able to re-educate them. If they don't, and they're sitting neutral on it, then I don't need to go into that as much. So I think that's how I would handle it with either a buyer or a seller.
Makes sense. Any other comments around that? So the only other thing I would probably
Bill, poor Bill keeps trying to talk.
I want to move in front of the owl so that I can see him.
There's our owl right there in the middle by Bytop.
Oh, that's all right. Hey. No, I'm good. I'm good. I look good, man. I think the important thing for me is it gives me an opportunity to bring it up and to have some expertise and just a reason to talk about real estate. You know, it's kind of a big rumor. Let's talk about the rumor and have a conversation about real estate.
Got it. All right. So the consensus seems to be to not hide from it, but to have a high level conversation around it. That's helpful. So then the next question that has come up a number of times is, so that's how we communicate with our current clients. What are we doing as far as our databases, communicating on social media, other marketing types? You know, what should or shouldn't we do? Before I open this up for discussion, I will jump on my soapbox a little bit, because I've seen probably more harmful posts than I've seen helpful ones, from a lot of real estate agents that I'm not sure have read the entire document or have sought counsel on what they're trying to convey. I've seen a lot of posts that slander, quite frankly, the real estate industry as a whole. I don't think that's terribly helpful when you're trying to convey confidence in our industry and communicate value to say that, you know, we've made it too easy. So I'd highly encourage you to not go to the negative. If you choose to publicly talk about this. The other piece is I think it's too early to pass judgment either on NAR or make any assertions as to who the winners and losers are going to be on this. I recently heard an industry professional kind of pontificate on whether, you know, the sellers are going to win and the agents and the brokerages are going to lose and the buyers are going to lose. And there's a lot of speculation in that. And then there was justification in those guesses. And, you know, one of the examples is always, you know, VA buyers are going to have a really hard time because they're not allowed to pay for representation currently. And that's the part that nobody goes into, is the comma currently, right? There's, if you read, go on NAR's website, there's 2 or 3 different pages of FAQs around this settlement. And on every single one of them, it talks about the fact that NAR is currently in conversations with the VA to better understand what, if any, changes that they'll be making to their policies and rules, right? That they're just now getting this information just as we are. And so it's too early to necessarily say that, you know, our veterans aren't going to be able to use their benefits that they were promised. So I'd just be careful how heavy-handed we are with our comments.
And Matt, if I could just jump in real quick.
Please.
I also want to remind everybody that if you go onto a public site and you're talking to brokers from other agencies and everything, and you're talking about commission, that's an antitrust law that you can break. So go ahead and read to your heart's content, but try not to post, you know, and if you do, you don't want to post about commission or about levels or anything like that, because it could get dicey with that.
Yeah.
Protect yourself.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
some of these national Facebook groups, I just cannot believe the moderators have not shut them down yet.
It's terrible.
If I owned those Facebook groups, I would immediately take it offline.
Mhm.
It's not helping.
No,
Not helping our cause.
don't add fuel to the fire.
Yep.
Like if you need to have a conversation with someone, don't put it in writing where it can be used against you, right?
At any time.
At any time.
Yeah, they can go back to that.
I mean, email, text messages, like it all, like anything you put in writing is setting you up for risk. So be very careful with your word choices. And sometimes you have to keep your opinions to yourself and just make sure what you're stating is facts.
And
Not
you can't say, oh,
emotion.
gee, that was on a Saturday night, I wasn't working, because we're realtors 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
just add what Brittany said. I think I don't know if this is right, but I think as my thought process has evolved, if I'm going to pontificate or give my opinion, it's going to be in a one-on-one verbal setting with Matt Madden or Bill Hench or Gary Nuccio. If we want to think about innovation or what this means, it's going to be between me and another person verbally. And certainly that's healthy enough. But I'm not going to go to a group of people and start giving opinions or pontificating. If I'm talking to a group of people, I'm going to use the exact slides from the settle agreement at NAR's website that anybody can pull. And I'm the source of the source. So, and even that, the one-to-many, you have to be careful because you can find yourself in a conversation where you're forced into an argument or a debate that you just don't want to be in. And so anytime you go one-to-many, it's just more risky than having a conversation privately with somebody. If you do put anything out there in the one-to-many, you understand you're taking a risk in having those conversations, and never pontificate. Just be the source of the source and point to the public information that's already on record at NAR's website.
Yeah.
Also,
Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, like, just remember the mortgage industry went through massive amounts of changes after the market crash. And, you know, they survived. The ones that were able to provide value and were confident and knew how to do their jobs at a high level were able to make it through those changes. So this is just our time to go through some change. And I think we have to remember to look at it as opportunity versus a challenge.
For sure. So that was basically kind of in the context of social media, but in the realm of the rest of the media, I know at least one person on this call has been contacted by a media outlet asking for on-record comment. Okay, at least two people have gotten that request. Certainly, again, you are welcome to do what you feel capable and competent to do, and yet just remember that you might give a 5-minute interview that might get clipped down to about 30 seconds, and the soundbite that comes out might not be what you intended to say. So I would highly encourage you to think really hard about giving any comment to the press on this at this point, other than, as Dave said, directing them to the sources that he mentioned. Any other questions, comments, thoughts on communicating either with our database or through other social media channels at the moment? All right, so Brittany just kind of touched on it. Just remember that price is only an issue in the absence of value. So, you know, this is just one more time that we get to remind ourselves to get clear on what our value is, make sure that we clearly communicate our value, and then clearly make sure that the consumer understands how we get compensated for that value that we provide. If you do those things, I don't think there's much to fear in the future. And so with that, we have a couple things coming up to make sure that you have on your radar. So on the 25th, that's Monday at noon, KWRI is doing a similar leadership call. They're calling it the NAR Settlement Open House. That's from noon to 1 with the executive leadership team from Keller Williams International. On the following day, so on the 26th, there is an ongoing session called Value Squared. So it's from 1 to 5 in the afternoon on the 26th. This is a great opportunity to get clear on how to communicate your value. Did anybody go through the session a week or two ago?
Jenica did.
You did?
Yeah.
Don't think she's here. Yeah, we'll make sure that link gets out there. I think I've heard really good feedback on that one so far. And then, as always, Education Tuesdays are going to have a lot of value-centric content going forward.
Matt?
Yeah.
I'll just add, since Jenica isn't on the call, she's obviously doesn't run our team anymore. And it's ironic because, she has a different job and she doesn't attend many trainings and for KW any longer. But she did attend this and she said it was one of the most worthwhile trainings that she's attended at KW. And she knows how much Drew trains with the team on getting buyer's agencies signed and going through a buyer presentation with every single buyer. And she said, her comment was, I think Drew and the team should definitely be in Value Squared because there's a lot of information there that I've never heard from them. And I took a glance at the slide deck of Value Squared, and there were concepts in there on value proposition to buyers that I've never even thought of. And I thought the slides were incredibly helpful, and I've registered for the class and looking forward to it.
And I'll say we will, so there's Zoom links I posted in the Facebook group today. We'll make sure we get all that information emailed out to you in the need to know as well. But on Monday, Caleb will live stream the KWRI call. So if you want to be in person together to watch that, you can also join via Zoom. The Value Squared courses, we are going to make sure we live stream in here, but you can hop on Zoom. So if you're not able to make it in, I can work with Ashley or maybe Drew on also live streaming those.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And
so we'll
Carlisle
have
office is scheduled.
We'll have it everywhere, so that way you have many options to make sure you get those classes in. And then lastly, if you do see people maybe not posting the greatest things on social media, you are more than welcome to share those Zoom links. They don't have to be a KW agent to watch that national call on Monday or the Value Squared calls. So if you've got friends in the industry and they're panicking, our value to them can be to invite them into those courses so they don't feel lost.
Is there anything anybody showed up today hoping to talk about or hear about that we didn't cover? Drew?
Yeah, I just wanted to send somebody from our team brought this to my attention and thought it was just so good that PAR's website has Matt said right now we're operating, our forms are still the same, they're not changing. And PAR's website has the standard forms on there, and for every standard form there is a guideline for the agent on how to use that form. And the buyer agency one is really good to teach you how to speak to the buyer about your fee, and it's very applicable to what we're doing right now. So if you haven't downloaded that, it walks you through how to talk to your buyer about your fee in this scenario, and same for the seller.
Yeah, all those guides are really helpful.
I have one question.
What you got?
So I had a lender reach out to me on Tuesday night, and I was in the car, and this is a lender who showed up at one of my open houses. And he's like, he made the comment to me, have you had any of your buyers concerns yet and so forth? I'm like, nope, I'm on my way to play volleyball. I mean, I was keeping it so light. And he said, well, if you do, we already have something in place that would take care of making sure that you guys get paid. And I thought, yeah, I don't think you do yet. And I was wondering if anybody else heard of anything, because as far as I know, it cannot be financed and a lender can't. Anybody hear anything?
No, I haven't heard anything, but if you read the entire NAR FAQ and the PAR FAQ top to bottom, you'll see commentary like the question of, will our fees be allowed to be financed in the future? It's like a frequently asked question.
Right.
And their answer is, just as Matt said, there's a lot of lobbying and innovation and conversations being had at governmental levels, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, PAR, where they're talking about everything you just said. It doesn't mean any of that will be viable, but it doesn't mean it won't be. So the only thing I've heard is it's like nobody really knows.
Right.
And you can just imagine the amount of changes in our industry that have happened in the last 20 years. If you would have asked my dad and grandfather in the 40s, 50s, and 60s if they would have been sharing their commissions with their competitors someday, they would have told you were nuts, let alone sharing their listings with their competitors. And of course, the water police women is that you have to share your listings and your commission with your competitors. And now we're going back to you can, but not on this particular thing. And so there's just nothing so constant as change. So I would just say, as you said, breathe. I haven't heard anything that it can be financed right now, but I can see people are looking into, hey, can it be?
And I would suggest, Julie, if you don't mind, send Brittany or I an email with the name of that lender or anybody else. If you hear of things like that, let us do the research and compile the information and vet those things out. And that way, if there is something that will be helpful for everybody, we'll be able to share that in a timely fashion. And it also doesn't bog you down with a whole bunch of those calls.
Well, and I think Jeremy would be a great resource to tap into as well, because he deals with various funding sources and he might, have some information or hear some grumblings about how they're going to respond. So he might be someone good to tap into about this as well.
Of course. All right. Anything else for the good of the group? All right. Awesome. I appreciate everybody being here today. Sorry I wasn't there in person.
Miss you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks all.
See ya.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.